now, and hopefully it's capturing everything going on my desktop. So folks, today we're going to start using Unity. It might seem pretty slow to start a class because we're going to be going through real basics. Hopefully by the time we get to the end, you'll see how you kind of take these concepts and you kind of make something a little more fun. The first thing is Unity. Is it a 2D or a 3D engine? Yeah, at a fundamental level, even if you're doing, and I don't know if you encountered this with your 2D games, even when you're doing 2D, that's still running all the 3D stuff in the background. Have people noticed that? Things still have like a Z position and stuff, like in theory they have it. You can turn the camera to a 3D view if you're inside 2D. So everything in Unity is always represented within 3D space, basically. And it's useful, even if you're making 2D games, to think about things being represented as 3D, because sometimes you have to move between the two a little bit, depending on what you're using. Okay. So what did I just draw there on the board? A dot. Yeah, a point. Anyone ever heard the term a vertex? Yeah. What's a vertex?
Point on the...
Yeah, it's a point. Basically, it's a point in space, like a point in 3D space, basically, that's it. And it has a x coordinate, so we'll call that x. A y coordinate. And a z coordinate, which is always tricky to do, but I'm going to draw it like going back that way. Does that make sense? Z goes like it's going into the screen, basically, or into the board. Okay, does that make sense? That exists in 3D space. So if, let's say, we were to say that this room is a world, and let's say the door there is at 0, 0, 0, and we're in Unity units, let's say I'm 8 meters from the door. So what you would say is, on the x-axis, I might be 8. I'm in 1 meter, so on the z-axis I'd be 1, and let's say my head is like 1.6 or something like that. Does that make sense? Okay, that's where I exist in 3D space. We represent that as x, y, z. Okay, we can call that a vector. In Unity, that's generally called like a vector tree. Okay, anything that it doesn't have to be x, y, z. A vector tree can also be R, G, B. Or actually, that's one easy way to remember. Seems I went to the effort of bringing my 3 colors. Or that's an F, not an R. So or. Okay, is there anything similar between RGB and XYZ? Is there anything similar between these, other than being vectors? Yeah, so they're all vector trees. One thing is, right, when you look at Unity, if you open it up and you're wondering which one's, like you look at the scene view and you wonder which one's my x-axis, X is R, X is red, Y is green, G, and Z is blue. Okay, does that make sense? RGB, XYZ. Okay. They're the same. Like Unity basically displays Z-axis as blue, Y-axis as green, and X-axis as red. Okay. So if you're ever like just wondering, oh, which axis should I pull on here? That's normally it. It can get a little bit tricky, basically. So the other thing you have is you've like global coordinates. So let's say we said my position was, we said it was 8, 1, 1.6. Okay, this is my, if we say world space, the world of this room is basically defined as the door there at 0, 0, 0. I'm standing at 8, 1, 1.6, or like my eyes are at 8, 1, 1.6. So if we're putting a camera to simulate my eyes, that's where we put it. Okay, we can now think about things being relative to this. So let's say if I was to like hold this out in front of me like this. Okay, what I basically be doing is moving this forward in the z-axis. Does that make sense? Okay, so it would be like, well, I gotta hold it right in front of my eyes so that it would only be in the x-axis. Or sorry, in the z-axis. Does that make sense? If I held it a meter out this way, it'd be in the x-axis. If it's going right, it will be positive z, left, or it'll be a positive x this way, negative x. Does that make sense? So if we're moving back the screen, we go minus, forward the screen, we go plus. Does that make sense? Yeah. So that's the thing about this in 3D space. If I rotate, does the relative position of the pen change to me? No, it's always in the same relative position to me. But my rotation is changing. Does that make sense? Okay. So its position in world space has changed. It's now a meter further out, but its position relative to me has not changed. Okay. That is basically the parent-child relationship inside the so parents basically dictate the coordinate system for children. Okay. You can set things to work locally or globally, basically, but we'll look at that in a little while as well. Okay. Does that make sense? Fundamentally, that's what we're doing. We're moving things in 3D space. Generally, like a 2D game, we're mainly moving in 2D, but we will have maybe a little bit of 3D. So that's a point. If I want to connect that point to another point, what will I use to connect 2 points together? A line, yeah. Yeah, a line basically connects 2 points together. Right. In 3D modeling, we often call that an edge. Okay, so this is, I'm gonna rub this out here, this vector tree. So we don't know what's up with this board. I think they cleaned it with some product that stops it being. So we're gonna call this an edge. This is a vertex. And if there's multiple of them, they're vertices. Okay. The difference between an edge and a vertex is an edge represents a single point in space. Does that make sense? A single infinitely small point in space. Okay, a point has no length or width or height. Does that make sense? It's just like the precise position where something will be. An edge, we now have like a length. So it goes between 2 points, and that how far apart those points are dictates the length. So if I'm holding this a meter out, if I draw a line between like this vertex here and my eyes here vertex, it's like 1 meter. Does that make sense? Okay, that's what this edge is. Okay, that would be an edge. Basically. If we've got a third point, we can connect this to this to this, and we enclose the shape. Does that make sense? That's the smallest 3D shape we can possibly make is made up of 3 vertices. Does that make sense? There's nothing, we can't use 2 vertices to ever make up a 3D shape. We can create triangles basically once we move to 3. If we move to more, we can go for more complex shapes. Actually, I'm going to. This is the worst. But it's kind of cool the way it smudges. What's encapsulated here is called a face. Okay, does that make sense? That's the face. Oftentimes, we'll talk about them triangles or polys. Polys generally is broader, like poly. If you ever hear of a polycount, sometimes it means triangles, sometimes it means quads. Quads have 4 vertices basically, so they basically make some sort of squarish shape, maybe trapezoidal or whatever. Does that make sense? If we understand that Unity works on these, today when we're working in 3D inside Unity, we'll be able to, you'll see once we're using ProBuilder, we're going to switch between vertex mode, edge mode, face mode, and then object mode. Okay, and the object might be made up of like, let's say something that goes off like that. That's what I did say. Does that make sense? That's our object now. It's got multiple faces, it's got multiple vertices, multiple edges. Okay. When we work in ProBuilder, we can either select the whole object and move it around, or we can select one vertex and we could pull it out or push it in. We could select an edge and move it down, or we could select a face and move it around, or multiple faces. Does that make sense? That's basically what we're going to be doing. We're going to be manipulating objects in 3D space. Like, the reason I like to go through it now like this is that we're not worried about Unity, we're just thinking about this in the abstract. Okay, this exists and we're trying to think about how this works in real space. But it's fairly straightforward once you get the hang of it and you figure out like what you're doing. But it does take a little bit of practice and a little bit of work. Okay, so it is, for some people it comes very intuitively, for others it's just a bit more time you need like work on it. Okay. So when you go to open up Unity, the first thing you're probably going to have is the Unity Hub. Does everyone have Unity Hub installed at home? on their computers. Cool. Unity installs then is interesting. If you want to install, and I'll give you a little bit of history on how Unity does things. So Unity at the minute recommends 2021.3.16 F1. That is the current what's called the LTS, which is the long-term support. That means that this is like pretty much bug-free. You're not going to encounter major crashes. You can go for 2022.2.2 F1, which is called like the beta stream, so you might encounter crashes if you're on like 2022 version. Does that make sense? You're more likely to have crashes. Historically, these were normally the recommended versions. Like it was like the current year version was what you should be using, and the other ones, and the other ones were ones that were like kind of long-term support if you were working on a commercial release project. I'm going to work in this. There might be one or two classes where we jump into different versions, but you can have multiple versions installed. Okay. It should be fine. The only thing is make sure if you're working with someone else that you're on the exact same version, long number, short number, stuff. Okay. The way the naming works, 2021, this was first released in 2021. 0.3 means it was the third major release at the end of that year. 0.16 means that it's like the sixth major patch, and there's no F1 means like kind of the minor updates. Okay. That makes sense? That's how they name it. Yeah. Generally, yeah. Yeah. Check to see, as long as you're not having major issues, it's fine. When you're working with someone, you want to make sure you're on the same version. You can bring like laptops in here or whatever and install them while you're in here. LTS generally, it normally in the hub it'll tell you like that this is the recommended version basically. So for this class, go with the recommended version. There shouldn't be major issues as long as we're all on like the same. As long as we're all on 2021.3, basically. The other numbers are kind of slightly less important. Yeah. We'll see how you get on. I don't think for ProBuilder it'll be a major issue. This machine doesn't have any. It has a Unity hub installed, but no editor. Oh. Yeah, I'm gonna send an email after today's class to sort through that. So, folks, you can see here, like, here's the pre-release versions. If you ever hear about Unity has new features, you'll find them in pre-release versions. They used to be pretty stable and they were the main versions, as I said, but nowadays I'd recommend probably sticking to LTS, as much as I hate saying that, because I always like to play around with the new stuff. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new project. I'm just going to make sure this is recording. Yeah, okay, that all looks good from what I can tell. We're going to go with 3D Core. Okay, and to explain this, we might dabble in some of the other pipelines, ERP and stuff like that. But basically, there's 2D Core and 3D Core. I don't know how complex we want to get into this because they remake things complex when you start now. But anyway, there's other render pipelines that let you do like higher end stuff and things like that. If you're going for like web, which we're going to do with this, generally Core is good, or else URP is fine as well. But we're going to go with Core just because URP brings along some extra. It just looks slightly more complicated when you open it up. So we're going to go with Core. Project name, I'm going to call this ProBuilder. And just call ProBuilder and hit create project. It's going to do some stuff in the background and then it should open up reasonably quick. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, I see. I noticed that the other green parts. It's just written on. I don't like drinking more than
Oh no, we're not talking about. Okay, folks. So when Unity opens up, whenever that is for each of you, you're going to see a screen like this. Actually, sorry, I'll turn off the light because it'll be easier to see. You're going to see a screen like this. At the top, it gives you your project name, Unity icon. Sample scene is always the opening scene. It's stored inside here in the scenes folder. It tells you what version of Unity you're on and whether your license is personal or professional. And this is running DirectX 11. You can sign in here to Unity services. You probably all have a Unity account anyway if you have licenses and there's cloud stuff. Anyway, we won't worry about all the stuff up here. We will worry on kind of the core windows of the Unity editor. Yeah. So, scene view is the 3D environment view, or 2D if you're working on a 2D game. But even if you're working on a 2D game, the only difference in a 2D game is that this 2D button is clicked and it's showing you a 2D view of the 3D world. Does that make sense? That's all it's doing in 2D games. But basically, this is the 3D environment. We can like move around this and we can see things in it. We'll look at that in a second. That's the first thing we want to get comfortable with. Then we've got a game view, which shows us what our game is going to look like. At the minute, that's hidden behind here, which is a default that I hate, and we'll talk about changing these default layouts. Have you done like changing these layouts into something nicer?
Yeah, I've changed so much.
Okay. Yeah, they're like the default I find very annoying because the game is hidden and I always kind of want to see how things look. Then we have the hierarchy, and the hierarchy is basically this. It starts off with sample scene, which is our currently open scene. And it shows us all the different game objects in that scene. Okay? So at the minute, what game objects are in our scene? Camera and a light. Yeah, that's all we have in there. Okay? And you can actually see here in the 3D scene view, there's the camera icon there and the light icon. Okay? And that's it. That's like this shows us. It shows that these are basically a child of the sample scene. It means they're within the scene, which means they'll be relative to the scene. Project here is all the stuff in basically like the project itself. So these are the files on your hard drive, where this represents the layout of objects in your scene, this represents the files on your hard drive. Okay, so if you create a sprite, you're going to drag it in here somewhere, and then it's going to go there. If you save a new scene, you save it there. Does that make sense? This is all the like the sort of stuff in your project basically. Console is going to be important. And again, a thing I don't like about the default is that console is hidden there. But basically, the console is, you're probably all seeing like red and yellow messages pop up on console here when you have an issue. It basically is a way for Unity to tell you what's going on. Okay, and we'll go through that at some stage once we start writing a bit of code. And then we've inspector over here on the right hand side, which really to show you how it works, you have to click on something. So if I click on main camera, it's going to show me a couple of things. Okay, the way Unity works is everything that exists in the 3D scene, basically anything that has like a position and is in your hierarchy, is what's called a game object. Okay, so if you create something new in Unity, it's called an empty game object. It means it's like all it has is basically the transform. It has a name sometimes, some of that data, but basically it has a position rotation. So it's an empty game object. Most things we're going to interact with. Like, there are ways to program Unity and not worry about, like, this sort of stuff. Did anyone play the game RimWorld? You're familiar with it? RimWorld? So in RimWorld, like, they use, I think it's Hyman Sylvester's developer. He uses Unity as a way of doing the rendering, but all his code is his own thing. It's not really using it. But for the purposes of simplicity, we can say generally 9 times out of 10 we're using game objects. A game object will always have a name. It will have whether it's active or not. It will have a tag, even if the tag is none, and it will have a layer basically, and then it can set to stack. Then they will always have a transform component. Okay, basically they have to have a position in space or x, y, z. They have to have a rotation in x, y, z, and they have to have a scale in x, y, z. Does that make sense? Okay. There's this little magnet icon here. If you want to scale something, that'll scale it uniformly. So if you have a cube and you click the magnet, it's going to scale it uniformly. If you don't click the cube and you like scale it vertically, it's just going to scale it. Does that make sense? We'll look at that for a sec. Then this game object has additional components. Okay, and that's how Unity works. It's this idea of game objects are made up of components. Okay, so we have a game object that is a camera that has a transform component, it has a camera component, and an audio listener. The audio listener is basically there's only ever one of them in the scene generally, or only one of them active at the very least. The audio listener is the thing that gets the audio from the scene and outputs it basically. Okay, so if you're playing a first-person game, the audio listener is normally attached to the camera, which is attached to a player, so that you can hear what the player is doing. Does that make sense? If you're making a 2D game and your camera's all the way back here, you have to do you might change your sound effects to 2D sounds so that the camera can always hear the sound regardless of the space. So then there's stuff here on camera, like look, I'm not going to worry too much about this stuff. They're just different settings on the camera. One thing I would say when working with Unity is the default skybox, and this is the thing I always say, looks terrible. If you can, just change it to like a solid color and change the default color to something you like a bit more. Whatever it might be. Let's go for like that sort of color. Okay. And immediately your game will start to look at least like you're not using the default. And this shows you a little thumbnail of what it's going to look like in game. Now, as I mentioned, I don't really love the way this is laid out by default. I like to have my hierarchy over on the right. And so if I want to move my hierarchy, I just click where it says hierarchy and I can drag it around the place. I'm going to drag it over here to the right. I'm going to put the project underneath that. I'm going to put the console underneath the scene view. And I'm going to put the game view to the right of the console. Okay, something like this. That makes sense. This way I can see what's going on in the console. I'm always able to see what the game view looks like even if I don't have the camera selected. Now, my project folder is maybe a little small. There's one. Look, I'll show you what I normally do to this, but I normally go for a one column layout that looks more like this. Okay. And I think it's just a little bit easier to see and navigate when it looks like that. That's normally how my inspector is laid out. If I want to save those views, there's this button up here in the top right. It's got default. You can see a different version. There are different versions here. You probably won't have John or MSC. You can click Save Layout. And I'll call this Game Tools. And hit Save. Okay, and now if I'm like in tall view and I want to go back to my game tools view, I just click that button and it sets it back. Okay. What we're going to do in a while actually is because we're going to be using ProBuilder, we're actually going to use that so that we've got a separate, like we're going to create like custom editor layout for ourselves to use ProBuilder in, just so that like the tools we need while we're using ProBuilder are just a little more readily available to us. Because some things are more important than some things, like we won't need the console at all when we're working in ProBuilder. So, one quick thing I'm going to do is just to show you the scaling and stuff, I'm going to create a 3D object. I'll first create an empty, just to show you it starts off with a name, all this tags, and the transform components. Okay. I'm going to delete that out. I'm going to click Game Object, and I'm going to create a cube. Okay. Straight away we can see the cube is within view of the camera. Its default position 2, 0, 0, 0, rotation 0, 0, 0, and scale 0. So there's these different tools here that I can use on the inspector view. Okay, there's a view tool, which I think is normally pan in most programs. You can click that and you're able to like move this around the screen. Then you can click this move tool. And once you do that, you're going to be moving this object. Okay, and I can move any one of the axes individually. Now, if I get in a little closer, you might see that there's these cubes here at the center. And so I can move two axes together. Okay, so this would be G and B, which is Y and Z axis together. Okay, so that's going up and into the scene at the same time. And Y should be like a 2D platformer kind of movement. It's moving relative to the camera, basically. It's moving across the camera sphere. There's this rotation here. And again, similarly, we can rotate on this axis, this axis, this axis. And then there's also this outside circle, which lets us do just kind of relative to the viewport, basically. So now we're rotating relative to how we look at the object. And then there's scale. And so if we don't have this magnet clicked and we scale, we're just going to scale this way, okay? And similar if we do this. But now if we click this magnet, it's going to scale uniformly no matter what we do. And even if I unclick the magnet, oh, hold on, wait. I click this, and there's this little cube at the center. If you're scaling in the viewport, you can scale it up just with that cube. Okay? And that will also give you the uniform scale. There's this here, which is like the rect tool, which is really useful for 2D games. I don't really ever use it in 3D, but you can kind of pull shapes relative to a 2D viewport type thing. This is like the transform tool that has all of those controls in the one place, which again I tend not to use. The other thing is you can use on the keyboard, you can use Q is going to set you to pan, W is going to be movement, E is going to be rotate, R is going to be scale, T is going to be rectangle, Y is going to be that tree transform tool, and then I don't think U does anything. You can edit the bounding volume, which means that oh yeah, that's to edit the collider basically. That will edit what this collides. Okay, we don't have to worry. We won't worry about that last one right now. I don't think it's a great place for it, but yeah. In terms of UI, I don't think that is the same sort of thing you'd want to be moving as regularly as most of the other ones. So I'm going to delete out this cube now, and we're back to the scene. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to start working in ProBuilder. And to do that, we have to get it from the package manager. So you go Window, Package Manager, and it's not currently in the project. I'm going to click here. It says Packages in Project, and I'm going to go in the Unity Registry. So Packages, Unity Registry. And I'm just going to go for 3D World Building, which really ProBuilder is the main one we'll use, but it's ProBuilder, Polybrush, FBX, Exporter, and Terrain Tools. It's called 3D World Building. If you have ProBuilder, just install ProBuilder itself. It's fine as well. Oh yeah, you can use, so for this week, it's like ProBuilder just to get used to it as a tool. After that, it's whatever you want. Really. You can use, like some people use ProBuilder all the way, other people use like different tools. Before, people used to just make stuff out of cubes in Unity. And so yeah, it just depends. Yeah. And which? So that's a really good question. 3D world building is basically a feature set that includes 4 packages, one of which is ProBuilder. So it's given a Polybrush to FBX. The reason I'm just saying to install that is if you're working with, sometimes if you're working on this type game, generally you'll need those tools later down the line, and it's a bit easier just install it all at once. Um, so that should be installed there. I can close this. And what you'll notice is we have a new menu item here. Okay, and we've got two options in it. One is ProBuilder, one is Polybrush. And we're only going to work with ProBuilder. We'll click ProBuilder, ProBuilder window. Okay, and now we've got another menu we need to use. Right. Yeah, so to install ProBuilder, firstly you're going to go Window, Package Manager, and I'm doing 3D World Building, and then you'll hit Import there. And once you've done that, once it's installed, you should see tools listed there. ProBuilder should be one of the tools. And then just to open up a ProBuilder window. Okay. So this is our window here. You can use this like floating around like the way it is there, or else you can dock it somewhere. Oh my goodness. I don't know why that did that. There's a few things. When you're working with ProBuilder, normally your project and your hierarchy are slightly less important. And this console down here isn't really important at all. But I'll leave that there. So I'm just going to create a new layout here, and I'm going to call it ProBuilder, so that I can jump back and forth between this as I change it. Okay. ProBuilder here on the right has these different options. I can create a new shape, new poly shape. I can do smoothing, material editor, UV editor, vertex colors, orientation local, or light map UVs. So let's do this. So I'm going to start off and click this new shape button. And it's going to let me create a shape, and this is going to be, this is actually stuck in this window here, but anyway. So I'm just going to start off and create a cube. Okay, I'm just going to create a cube, you just click and you're going to drag out a square, and then you're going to go a square. Okay. So this is a ProBuilder cube. It has like this default material that tells you like what's 1 meter by 1 meter on the material. Okay. Okay, and then you can unclick new shape, and then you're able to like click. Let's say if I go for face mode, you can click and move faces individually. You can rotate them or scale them if you'd like. You can select individual vertices and move those around. You can select edges, and you can move edges. And you'll see there the material kind of just flows around whatever shape you're creating. Okay, so I'm just going to ask people to like create a cube in ProBuilder and just mess around with it, pull it, stretch it, like just mess around with it and try and get a feel for like manipulating the vertices, faces, edges. We got ProBuilder in. Oh, okay, cool. So this is ProBuilder. It's just yes. Hit that very sharp, and then you see the tools. Oh yeah.
How do you find the 3D thing?
Oh yeah. So just go click new shape, and then just create a cube. And click it. So click it.
It works very similar to Blender.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like very like sort of imprecise, but like kind of nice.
You ignore it, like. Oh. I really hope you're not making this video. Pushing so hard, that actually hurt. Go in like this. Clowns. Beautiful clowns. Oh my god. What the fuck? Come on. Cool, this is fucking or was he saying this? He's like, he's like, you know what? This is what else because we're playing Switch. Seriously, it was oh my god. I think you should I think you should recreate that scene in Aaron, you are dying. You can what? Oh, she can what?
I'm not. It's my idea. There's a Oscar. There's also a ball.
Yeah.
Oscar. Oscar. It's not. It's like.
Look at this.
I'll make mine.
That's why this iPad came out like last year or something like that. Yeah. I think it's the first one. I don't know. The first gen players so useless because you have to take it off the charger. That's why I never know what iPad. This is charged from that. Yeah, I know. I think we should put them at the same time. But you know what that is? One telephone company will give you your location. Green grass.
Okay, make a concrete Oscar. Uh-huh. It's like a gigantic.
Make this.
I don't know. Is that spot right?
No, it doesn't look like it.
Yeah, I saw. I was thinking about it. Straight on it. Yes, that's what it is.
No.
Look, he pulled him. I should not go. So that one, that's pretty good. You can't even tell the difference. It wasn't tell ball. It says ball.
You have like a thicker spine or something?
Or you just dislocate your spine going through. Spinal disc. And then say,
My
say
iPad.
the right hand. Also not happy.
I was gonna say you make an airplane. Wow.
I'm going.
Yeah.
Who's talking?
Okay.
Did she go to
Aaron just jumping.
I'm going to get food.
Yo, I'm making oil on the camera. Singing. The circle and then vertices. Yeah. I'm making a proper picture. You mind your business. Yeah.
I'll make it being this thing.
No.
What do you think?
Yeah.
Okay, so everyone made a cube at this stage and messed around with it at the very least. Cool. I think most people have made a lot more than a cube. So, oh, what's going on? Okay, cool. So, folks, you'll see, if you see the cube, right, you'll see its properties here. Like, so it has, it's shaped as cube, its pivot is the first corner. You can set the pivot to the center, whatever it might be. Yeah, the pivot is kind of point you're going to move it from. But anyway, I'm going to click on the arch, and I'm going to just turn off the arch properties, the shape properties for a second. There are some things like the arch, actually most things I think, the arch and the cone and the cylinder, this door, the tube, the donut that everything always has to have. But anyway, they have all these extra settings. Okay, and what this means is that this arch would have a thickness of 0.1, it would have 5 sides, its circumference would be 180, which means that like it's a 180 degree arch, and it's going to have end caps. Does anyone want to guess what end caps are? Yeah, it's basically like that the bottom of the arch. Actually, I'll show you, right? Like that's probably the easiest thing to do is just to so that did not create the way I thought. So with end caps on, it makes that type shape. And if I turn off end caps, it makes this kind of shape. Does that make sense? Has everyone played a level where you clip through the geometry or something and you kind of see outside the world? Yeah. That's basically what you're seeing here. Faces normally by default are one-sided, which means they're like a, one-way mirror, where like there's one side that's solid, you can't see through it, and the other side's actually okay. So, oh yeah, I changed that for both. Let's turn on end caps on this. Sorry, while you have the thing selected, you can, let's say if I want to increase the sides here. Let's say I go 12 sides, I can make a more rounded arch. Does that make sense? The number of sides basically in a circle or something circular, that basically determines how rounded it is. In all 3D software, every circle basically is being approximated to like straight lines at some sort of hardware graphics card level. Which means that even if you see something that looks like a perfect like triangle like that, if you got really close to it, what you'd actually see is line, creating that edge basically. Okay, but they're all these tiny little lines creating the smooth curve. So I'm gonna create that arch. If I click new shape, that's gonna have it made. And I'm gonna drive my camera underneath. And I'm gonna go to face mode now, and I'm gonna select this. And I'm gonna hold down Control and select that face, and that lets me select these two faces together. Okay. Because I've selected, we'll call them the end caps. If I hold down Shift on the keyboard now, it's gonna extrude those. Okay, so Shift will do an extrusion, which means that it's just dragged those legs down a little, basically. If I hold Shift again, I'll do this for this reason, and then I'm gonna select this face, hold Shift. Okay, vertex now. Cool. So I've now created like a little tunnel basically pretty quickly there. I can also be standing inside this and see that it's probably about a 1 meter tall tunnel because of the way this texture wraps around it. It's probably just under a meter tall. Okay, does that make sense? Yeah. We can do all sorts of things here if we wanted. We'll see what way this will work. Hold on, I'm actually going to go with this. Actually, no, I'm going to do this. Okay, and now I'm going to switch to the scale tool, which is pressing R on the keyboard, and I'm going to hold shift. And so, okay, am I going to do that? No. So I'm going to hold shift and just scale it vertically. Oh, that doesn't work great either. Okay, look, that's fine. This shows like how we'd kind of fix this. Okay, so it's created all these kind of jaggies here that we might want to fix. One thing is when you're working in perspective, it can be pretty hard to fix this sort of thing. So you can click where it says perspective here, and it's going to give you an isometric view. And then you might also want to click that, which is, oh crap. So, and then one thing we can do here is if we go for the vertices, we can click and drag these, press W. I'm gonna move that there. And I've lost where. I'm just gonna drag these out in pretty much an approximation. And okay, and then I can turn this off. Oh wait, I was editing from this end. Okay, so now we have that sort of like, again, that's maybe not quite perfect. It is, so that's, there is, but it'll scale it in all dimensions uniformly. So then it was scaling it outwards as well. So probably what I should have done is done that and then just scaled in the sides is probably I think that's probably the nicer way to do this rather than all the setting. But sometimes you'll have shapes where you are doing all this stuff. Yeah, and that's basically that. And we can then select. So you can select, let's say, parts of this individually if you want. And again, similarly, you can press I use W and Shift. Oh. To kind of scale those out. Okay, and we kind of have that sense of like a, I don't know what you call that, stonework above a door, basically, but that sort of thing. A couple of things to be aware of is that there's a general rule of thumb with 3D modeling. If it's big enough to get your fingers in the gap, basically, you would 3D model it. If it's any smaller than that, you normally use textures. Okay, that's like the rule of thumb. It can kind of vary a little, and it depends on, like, Unreal does some funny things with, like, with the amount of detail you can actually model in and how it handles it, but Unity doesn't do that. Generally, you want to go for as little detail as possible. Often as well, when you're using ProBuilder, you're doing like what's called grey boxing. Have you come across that term before? Grey boxing, white boxing, block mesh, different terms like that. What it basically means is you're kind of laying out the level and the environment as it should look, broadly speaking. So you're putting in like, oh, here would be a tunnel, you know, and like it just has to be a tunnel that functions as the right height in space. What would normally happen then is an environmental artist will take that, so you export this out as an FBX. Environmental artists would take it, they'd like model it into something that like looks nice, and you'd bring it back in and see that would be the in-game asset would be slightly different, but it would maintain the scale and stuff. Does that make sense? Cool. In terms of shapes, I suppose other ones that are useful just to be aware of are stairs in particular can be tricky. This oh, maybe it doesn't let you change these. Maybe it won't. They used to. Okay. I just want to check and see if. Yeah, cool. So I'm gonna undo everything I've done here. And I'm gonna set this back to steps height. And I'm gonna set the height to like 0.05 or something like that, which I think is the default Unity character step height. And what it'll do basically is as you go higher, it will drag up an appropriate number of steps for you. Okay, does that make sense? When 9 times out of 10 in a video game, if you're walking up steps, you're actually like a capsule, basically like a tic tac, and then you're basically floating up the steps. So it's all about like the number of steps and the step height. If the step height is too great, your character won't move up it basically, and then people kind of fudge it. Generally, the collision for a stairs is a just a ramp, basically like a ramp goes like that, as opposed to being actual individual steps with dynamic collisions for each step. And that's the same. There is a circular stairs still here? Was anyone able to make circular stairs? No. They used to have circular stairs. I can't believe I got rid of it. They were cool. Like, totally pointless and really annoying, but like cool. So one thing, right, and like we can use this to give a little bit of like level design advice. If you're making stairs in a video game, walking upstairs can actually get like pretty frustrating. So try and make sure that like your stairs are like wide enough for the player, unless you want it to be about how difficult it can be to walk upstairs. Make sure your stairs are like plenty wide enough for your player and stuff like that. Try and make sure you've got like guardrails either side and stuff like that so they don't just slide off. Yeah. Oh, there's a circle. I didn't even see the circle. Oh, cool. So yeah, we can do this. So we can do the curvy stairs. And curvy stairs are much worse for falling off of and being annoying. Because as you walk up in the video, as you walk up curved stairs, you have to constantly kind of be turning your camera to go up the stairs. Every year I have students who like make a tower that you climb up circular stairs of, and it never really feels great to be honest. But look, if you want to do that, that's like, I'm not going to stop you. But yeah, you can basically build stairs like this, and then click new shape, and there's your stairs, and we'll make another stairs. Oh, they really didn't go where I thought they were going to go. What have I done with these stairs? Oh, it's the shape of them. Ah. Oh, I like that though. But yeah, so you can end up getting some pretty pretty weird shapes. See, wouldn't that be cool? Stairs to climb in your video game. So yeah, that's like ProBuilder. They're the basic built-in shapes. You can play around with them. Generally, you might use them as like the basis for your level, or you might not. And then you can do a thing called a poly shape. So I'm gonna just click into this Y view, and I'm gonna just set this to orthographic so that I'm not seeing any distortion. Now in Unity, if I hold down Control as I move the mouse around, can anyone see what's happening? It's snapping to every quarter of a Unity unit, which means it's snapping to every quarter of a meter, which generally is fine. Like, it's rare you're going to need finer grain control or not. But I'm going to do that for this poly shape, and I'm going to like go from here to here. Gotta hold Control. Let's go up at a little angle here. Oh. Okay, and now we've made a shape that is like that. If you ever find yourself, folks, if you ever find yourself like looking off over here, and you know you've something selected and like you're looking around trying to see where is it, or How do you see it? Just press with your mouse over the viewport, press F on the keyboard. And F will focus in the viewport on whatever you're looking at. Okay. So this here then is our poly shape, which is this. So we can then extrude it as well by an amount if we want. So let's say I'm going to extrude this to like 2 meters high. If this is a video game, if this is going to be a level, let's say it's 2.5 meters high. Which is going to be a weird space to be inside. Okay. And then we can start moving things around if we want. This whole, yeah. So we can select a full face and we can do things like bevel, which will inset the face a little like that. It'll like, it creates kind of rounded edges. Again, when you do stuff like this, sometimes you do have to like, it's not like in SolidWorks if you click bevel, it's generally 9 times out of 10 really good at getting a pretty accurate bevel. Depending on your shape, sometimes it will have issues. But what we can do instead of beveling is we can hold down Shift, and if we do this scale, yeah. So again, we're able to scale like this. We can try and maybe get our bevel working a little better. Okay, so that can be like the roof of our building, basically. Okay, and we can like W, we can shift and extrude this up and all that sort of stuff. Okay, whatever we want to do, we can have stuff going in here. Okay, so you can use this to create all sorts of whatever sort of shape. That might be some sort of like grain silo or something like that that the player can control. Does that make sense? Try to see what's kind of useful then. Let's say we wanted to be able to like have this face kind of like split in two. One thing you can do is if you go into edge mode and you select this and then click insert edge loop, it's going to create a ring of like lines so that now we can split that and move it like that. Okay, so if you wanted to, you could kind of make it you're able to kind of like, let's say, round that basically by doing that. Okay. Does that make sense? You can do that. It just generates extra geometry and stuff for you. Like the connect edges is kind of the same thing, but it can sometimes leave you with slightly. I don't want to get too much into like what is bad geometry because there's definitely plenty of it here, and I don't think it's something you should worry about. But if you click that and that, and you click connect edges, that's just going to put a line between them that you can then drag out like that. Oh wow, I've dragged it out like that. That you can drag in this direction. Okay, but what you don't have is it hasn't generated any additional geometry here, basically. And that is that. Are there any questions on that? What's that? Thanks. Yeah. So like having, so yeah, I'll show you. I think I know what you're asking. We'll just see if this will work, right?
So basically for like having an edge.
Yeah. I don't know, kind of, right? So let's, if we select this, and let's hit bevel. Where's bevel? Here. So let's go like 0.01 maybe. So as you click that, so as you click that again, oh. So that is kind of curved it out, but it hasn't done a great job. Can we undo? So instead I'm going to select the edges here. Sorry. Yeah, cool. The edges of that face, 0.01. Now when I bevel, it's got these still selected, so if I bevel it, oh, sorry. Just to show you what way that looks. If I hit bevel again, it'll re-bevel. Does that make sense? But probably what you'd have to do, I think, to make it look well is to halve this amount every time. And that's going to look smoother. And then... Normally, yeah, you'd be like, this is kind of, as you said, this is more so for like the sort of rough and ready kind of person. Now you can make something decent. Like you can use it to make a game, but it's not as refined as something else you might be using. But like again, you know, that's a pretty, for the size of that, it's a pretty smooth edge on that corner basically. So it kind of all depends. If you want something like to look great, normally you're going to be going to Blender, 3D Studio Max or Maya or something like that. So they're kind of main shape tools that are kind of important to us. One thing we're going to do is we're going to create the custom material. Yeah. You know what? I'm going to save this scene and I'm going to create a new scene. And I'm going to make it as basic built in. I'm going to save this straight away into my scenes folder and call it maybe ProBuilder demo. Now, the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a new material. So I right click in the project, create, and I'm going to create a material. And I'm going to call this reference image. Now the shader for that is currently set to default. I'm going to change that to a ProBuilder shader, and it has the reference unlit. Okay, the reason it's unlit, it means if it's dark or bright, it's always going to be like fully visible basically. And I'm going to select the image as this camera here. We're just going to model out like basically this camera just to like see how we can go about using this as a reference image. Okay. So you can double click on that. That's our material in our reference image. I'm going to again change the camera background to something that looks nicer. There we go. And what I'm going to do is create a new shape. And it's just going to be a plane. What shape is that? Tell me what shape you are. Okay, plane. Cool. So I'm going to look at this kind of on from the Z axis. I'm just going to, will a plane only? Why is this not letting me create a shape? Okay, there we go. I don't know why it's not letting me make it the other way. But anyway, that's fine. I'll just look top down. It's being a bit weird. And I'm going to hold down control for this because I want this to be like a perfect square. We can deal with the scaling later. So that should be like 10 by 10 by 10. And the material I'm going to put on it is my reference image. Okay. And you can see there my reference image is on it, but it looks pretty tiny. We can do what's called UV editing. So, okay, and that means we can come over here to the UV editor. Cool. So you can see here, it's showing us like the scale of this UV relative to what we're doing. And so can we, I think this will uniformly scale. So we can do this. Okay. You don't need to be, when it's reference images, you don't need to be too exact. Okay, I'm going to go with something like that on my reference image. Does that make sense? I'm able to move around where the 2D image is on my 3D geometry. It could be a case that those UVs are for like grass or something like that, or like stone bricks on a wall, so I'm able to change the scale of it that way. Does that make sense? Cool. So then we're going to make our camera. Okay, and I'm going to close the UV editor. And to start off, what do you think would be the best starting shape to make this? There's a couple of options. Yeah. Yeah, we could start with a square, or we could do a poly shape if we want. So I think I'm going to do like a new poly shape. I'm going to hold down Control. There we go. So what I'm doing there is, my reference image isn't necessarily like exact. So what I'm trying to do is just come up with something that kind of will approximate it. I'm going to go like 1 deep, but that should be fine. Oh. If you ever see your camera, I don't know if you saw there, do you see the way the camera is clipping through it? Just press F on the keyboard and that should fix. That's basically the camera is too far away or too close and the clipping plane is basically interfering with it. So that will reset the camera focus. So this is our camera shape. I'm going to take this plane and, you know what, that's fine. The first thing I'm going to do is try and bevel these edges. Actually, can I select all the edges? Yeah, so if you hit Control A, it'll select all the edges. And I'm going to see what happens if we try and just bevel them all together. And so let's say, what's that? We probably want to go about like 0.25 on the bevel. Okay, and let's try that. Okay, that's probably too big, but we've gotten like a cool effect on our camera. We've kind of broken that corner though. So let's go 0.1 maybe.
I think that's bevel the edges as well.
Oh, has it? So I think it is. I think if I unbevel this, hold on. If I unselect this, basically. I think that might work a bit better. Okay, look, that's fine. You know, as I said before, things aren't always perfect. What we can do is just move that into the correct-ish position. Oh wow, it's flipped these edges, has it? Yeah. So what it's done here is flip these faces. So you should be able to hit that and flip face normals. So we can click that and flip face normals, and we'll do the same here. Did any more of them flip the wrong way around? Okay, cool. So again, I'm just going to like approximate the solution to this. Okay, that's creating something like what we expected. Okay, and for now, I'm just really only interested in like these front faces. Okay, cool. So that's the front of our camera. That's kind of the shape we were looking for. So then I'm going to select this and I'm going to go to object mode and I'm going to bring it forward. And there's a few more details we're going to add in. So we're going to put a cube here. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to do that as that. And then we can do the this shape. Cool. Okay, and what we can do here is change the thickness of all this, change these values. My Unity is being very strange. But firstly, we want to increase the sides count. So I'm going to go for like something pretty big here, let's say 32. Seems okay. Size, I'm going to go 1, 1, 1. Okay, just so that it's kind of uniform. Thickness. Going to that. Cuts. Okay, that's all fine. Okay, cool. And I can change my Z value here. Oh, no, it's not the Z value, it's the Y value. I can change. And something like that. And then if we go to new shape, we're just going to get this in position. And I'm going to scale that up. Cool. Okay, so that's going to be our simple little like kind of camera asset. Now one thing is like our materials at the minute like don't necessarily look nice. So we're going to create a couple of new materials. And I'm going to create a new material and I'm going to call this camera body. And the shader for this is going to be ProBuilder, and I'm going to go for a diffuse vertex color on this. Okay. And I'm going to apply that to the camera body, and you'll see there it loses like that kind of default ProBuilder material. Now, vertex colors are kind of something you can do in ProBuilder that's kind of cool, and I'll show you how it works now. You can click this vertex colors button. And let's say I want to make the whole camera body like pretty much black. I can hit apply. That makes it all that color. Okay. But let's say I want to like kind of make a couple of corners slightly different color. I'm going to like select this corner here and apply like a silverishness. Okay. That adds kind of like a gradient. Does that make sense? What vertex coloring does is it blends the color between this vertex and that vertex. And that's what we're getting there. We're getting a gradient across those. Okay. Do you, images? No. But like whatever colors, you can click like the eyedropper here, and let's say you wanted a goldish color. Sorry. Yeah, you can select like a different color by clicking it here, and that's it. I don't know, what does goldish look like? That sort of color maybe? Does that make sense? So you can change it to like custom colors. That probably ends up being a bit too intense, so what I do here is probably make this one black, and then you get like it's kind of like a shine along it there basically. So there's different ways to do it. You could also, let's say if you wanted that to be like a detail around it, you can go to face mode, and I'm just going to select these faces kind of quick, so this won't be perfect. And hit apply. And now that kind of like has given around the outside. Does that make sense? So it's like it allows you to do that sort of vertex, monument valley, sort of low poly color shading type stuff. Okay. And we can do the same thing here. We can come up with our own color for the lens. So we create a new material. Actually, we can use the same material, sorry, on everything. So the button, is that the button or the flash? I don't know. But we could maybe say that that's the flash and we're going to make it that sort of color. And the lens here, we could select the whole object and we could go with, that looks awful. Let's try and get a color that would look nice here. That's not going to look nice, but anyway. Okay, so does that make sense? That's basically how we can create like our custom assets. We might want to like duplicate this, move it over here. I'm gonna make that. Okay, so again, our reference is just to inform us as we're working on this about how it should look. Okay, and then what I'm going to do here in the hierarchy is I'm going to create an empty object and I'm going to call it camera. Oh. And I'm going to select all these objects. I'm going to make them a child of the camera. And I'm going to hide the plane. And now, hopefully, my camera is basically an asset I can move around. I'm going to set its position to 0, 0, 0. I'm going to go back to perspective view. So we now have our little asset in view and we're able to move it around. And actually, you know what? If this is a game jam and you just need a camera in your game for a game jam, something like this is perfectly fine. Like no one's really going to pay attention to the quality of the asset. You know, if that's the style of the game, that's the style of it. That lets us do that. Let's say that I wanted to create other cameras. I can drag this in here and this then becomes a prefab. And we can have our army of cameras. And the cool thing about prefabs is if we double click them, we're able to edit them by themselves. So let's say I don't like this blue here and I maybe want it to be a darker blue. I can open up vertex colors and make it this darker blue color. And when I go out of the prefab mode, they've all updated to that. Does that make sense? Have you worked with prefabs before, folks? Yeah. Okay, cool. As long as you're comfortable with that. Folks, are there any questions on that with ProBuilder? Bit of stuff moving things around. Being able to import a reference image is really useful. So you can do that the way we showed there of like using the camera body. It's just you'd use your own image as opposed to one that was in there. Other things that are important with it, I'm trying to think of what's kind of crucial. That's kind of main things. Definitely change like your camera background. Okay, so like it just doesn't look well. Another thing I'm going to say here that is useful to do is I'm going to move this back a bit like here. When you're making this, because like this game isn't really going to do anything, I'd recommend doing like text mesh pro, import TMP essentials. Okay, and I'm going to write here like camera club or something like that. Oh, why did I do camera club FF? So you can do stuff like this, you can change it, like so if you make that bold. Let's say you were in a camera club You can make them posters, stuff like that. You can change the font here. There's only 2 fonts by default, but you can import others. You can change the text color if you want. You can center the text, which generally looks a bit nicer. To make sure wrapping, overflow, all that stuff. Okay, so you can play around with that stuff. It's just useful sometimes to have like text on screen, basically. That if you're next week when you're like putting up your thing on itch.io, it's going to be important that you say what it is and where it is, and it's useful if that's embedded in the game. So, to show you now how to build this game for web, you just go Window, you go File. You click here, Build Settings. One thing you need to do on Build Settings is click Add Open Scenes. And that's added our ProBuilder demo scene to the build. Oh no, I don't have something. I'm going to show you something in a second, but this is going to build and run for Windows. Okay? And I'm just going to save it here. Go. So the build normally will take a couple of minutes just to compute. There is, folks, one thing is, next week I'm going to be asking you to make the build as WebGL. And to do that, I'm trying to remember where this is. Is it settings, preferences? Yeah, so if you go to your current installs of Unity, you can click this Add Modules. And I'm going to add in WebGL build support and click Install. Okay, and that's going to let me now build out to WebGL basically. Just do that. Okay, cool. Oh. So this is just it installing the WebGL, I think. Yeah. And basically we'll be able to build it and put it up on itch.io as a WebGL build. Is that okay? To do that, to create that on itch.io, I'll start making a page. You go to itch.io. You log in. You click dashboard, you can just click upload a new project. I'm going to call this Camera Club. It will give a default URL. You don't have to worry too much about description. You might put in the description of the place. What are you uploading? I'm going to say like this is other. It's not like a game or anything. Kind of project. HTML. I'm going to say it's released. And I'm going to upload my files there in a sec. Oh. Okay, cool. That's installed. So now, because I've installed that module, I have WebGL as an option here. I'm going to hit switch platform, and Unity, I think we'll have to open and reload. Or maybe it'll be okay. Okay.
So will we have to submit the ProBuilder as on the image?
Yeah, it's just the itch.io link. Yeah. And sorry, it'll take a minute here. You won't be able to build it while it's doing this stuff. So then we can go to build settings. It should be installed. Yeah, that is installed. For some reason it's... So I might have to reopen Unity here and build it. All you do after this step is you zip everything. So this is going to give me a HTML file and a folder. You zip all that together and you upload it to itch.io and it'll run from the web. Okay. If anyone has issues with that, let me know and I'll put up a video later in the week of how to do that. It's pretty straightforward. The other thing I just want to show is just some of the examples from last year, which might be here. I might have put all these in a collection. I think this is the one I made last year, but I think there's a collect. Oh yeah, okay, cool. So this, you'll know it's working like once you build it and like you just see that basically. That's the game running, but because there's no interaction, you just basically see whatever you built. Let me just check if... How do I go to a collection? Maybe if I add this, I can then click on it. Yes. Good. So here's some of the different places. Depending on the amount of effort people put in, they're finished to different standards last year. So this is that's the Hugh Lane Gallery in Dublin. This is a house. Celebrate Leinster House, a building. GPO is always popular. Basically, that gives you the idea of the kind of things people have done. The main thing is pick a place. Like, I'll have details on the brief of what you need to do. Pick a place, build it in ProBuilder as good as you can. It'll be up on Brightspace. I think I put, you can, did anyone try self-enroll on Brightspace? Yeah, that's the one, yeah. So the link's up on the Discord self-enroll. I'll send an email as well and I'll put the brief up later on tonight. Okay, cool. Any other questions? Folks, just so you know, for that brief, it will be due to be submitted at 12 midday next Monday. So the first 2 hours of class from 10 till 12. Oh, sorry, next week's actually a bit different. Sorry, that'll actually be due at 10 next week. In general, they'll be due at 12 because you're going to be kicking off to Google Game Jam at 10 next month. Is that okay? Cool. Any other questions, folks? If anyone has issues or hassle, just get in touch over the weekend, like anything that's gone wrong. As I said, there's a huge difference in like the stuff people made last year. Key things are that like it's on WebGL and it runs and you can see it. Everything else is kind of like nice to have, basically. Oh, that's my one. So yeah, make whatever you'd like. We didn't really touch on lighting, but if you want to put in lighting, it's like, I'm sure you all know how to do this. You'll find this easier if I turn off the directional light. So you see there the way the point light is basically affecting that. Okay, so you'll see there like changing the light can affect how things look as well. I'm gonna build this out anyway. I'm gonna close Unity. You're free to head away. I'm gonna close Unity so that the building to WebGL is up on the classroom.
I don't know. You're gonna learn today, boy. So you can learn. The real world.
You gotta stop smoking. Yeah. For your own health. That's the whole
What are you gonna make, Alex? Are you gonna play there? I'm gonna make your house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, we need those.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you. Okay, so there's this error.
So everything product's good on ProBuilder?
Which?
Everything's good on ProBuilder?
Just for this week, yeah. After this week, you can use other tools.
Thanks.
No worries.
Let me make Minecraft. It's still only gonna be 4 sides. This is 4 sides and 2 away. But it's 4K.
Color space needs to be changed to this. And we'll hit that. And hopefully that fixes it.
I already know I'll be missing a Monday in like 4 weeks, but can I just just hand up the assignment to They do have a loan system. That's what I'm doing. Yeah. Oh.
Apart from like a Star Wars like comic collection that I read once. I know it was fine. Like, I thought those collection of comics were fine. It's just kind of like alternate versions of that that wasn't like alternate things that are okay.
That was all popular.
We didn't get anything. They were like, oh yeah, we're wrapping up a PlayStation 5 for the whole entire country. And the
So many
manager
things
and Bray got it.
manager
And I'm like, that's red.
That-
You know, GameStop did have a good deal on like GameStop did have a good console bundle deal, though. Like for the like they had a good God of War Ragnarok console bundle. It wasn't that bad. I like
They
it.
have a better one right now. It's, if you buy the edition, you get 50% off anyway.
Really?
Yeah. And then you get
Right.
$10 off.
You guys have to stay here.
I do.
No, okay. I'll check. I'll probably say for well, I'm gonna say to check see Fountains. Fountains like going back. And then I might get this ProBuilder thing done. It's similar to Blender, which you can just get like you can kind of get a reference image and like basically model around that. But there are like a few differences. One thing I don't want to figure out is all like the shortcuts and everything, like that whole insert and stuff like that. But it's just a thing with me, like with any like software, I really just want to like learn the shortcuts quickly, so to keep like pressing buttons in the UI. I don't know, I just find it more time. It's just more time.
It's more time consuming, but I think it's like better off to be able to like personally
Yeah.